So let's get into today's interview with Todd Baker from Thrivent. And Todd, just to start this off, tell me a little bit about yourself. Tell me about your family, why you got into financial services and everything there.
Sure. I am married to my beautiful wife, Tina, and she is a teacher, fifth grade teacher. I have two grown children. My son, Matt, who works in the Kansas City area, and my daughter, Kelly, who's a graphic designer and lives in Northwest Arkansas. So they're out of the house, so we are empty nesters. We live on a small lake north of the city, and just really enjoy living in that area. But as far as my background, I've had about 30 years in financial services and insurance, and my passion is for helping people to identify their goals and to kind of connect their finances and their investments so that it supports their goals. I feel like everybody has dreams and goals that they want to accomplish, but sometimes they have a hard time getting those down and connecting what they're doing financially to help them support the goals.
Yeah. So what does that look like if somebody's coming to you and they're wanting to try to connect those goals? What does that process look like?
So we have a couple of appointment process, 2 or 3 appointments typically. And in the first appointment, we just really want to get to know the client, get to know the person individually and their family and what it is that they want to accomplish. Because everybody has different goals, depending on the stage of life that they're in, their family situation, married, not married, whatever it is, they have unique goals. And always caution people, don't just follow that rule of thumb thing that you see where people tell you, because your goals are unique and we want you to help accomplish your goals. What you're already doing has a big impact on what advice we might give you. So in those first appointment, we want to know, what you're doing, what your goals are, where you're at in life, and kind of your time horizon. How soon do you want to accomplish those goals, whether it's buying your first house, upgrading to a bigger house, something like that, or if it's retirement, a really long-term goal, sending your kids to college. I mean, everybody has different goals. They may even want to start a business, and all those things take money, and we can help you get invested and work towards that.
And I think that's huge, even in the real estate industry. If you're looking to move to the Kansas City area, if you've got a goal of a certain kind of house that you want, that's one thing that I try to be very cognizant of with my clients as well is I don't know exactly what your budget is or what you're comfortable with, I don't ever force people to say, hey, this is the house and you're not offering enough. You have to let them build that plan because only they know at that point in time until they get into more in-depth financial planning with a financial planner, which I advise for everybody. But until they've really sat down and taken a full picture of it, I have no idea what they're going to do. Like was meeting with a client last night and they're like, oh, we're probably difficult because we can't really tell you where we want to be. And I'm like, no, but I can't tell you where you want to be either because I'm not the one by the time you buy this house, you're the one that's going to end up having to pay for it. So if somebody's looking at making those moves, I can give you as much of my professional opinion as possible and say, hey, I think it's worth this much to the average buyer. But if it's not worth that much to you, well, that's different. That's a completely different story.
Right. Well, everybody's in a different stage in their life and different situation. You may have some folks that come out of college and they're debt free. Their parents helped them with their college or whatever. They had scholarships, and they're in a different position than somebody that maybe comes out of medical school. And they've got $200,000 or $300,000 worth of debt that they've got to pay. So what they do financially to get prepared to buy that house or whatever their next goal is may be different than the next person. So it really, we run people through a series of questions and tests to make sure that whatever advice we are giving them fits them individually at that point in time. Because it will change, as they get older and as they start accomplishing some of these goals, maybe their family situation changes, they get married, they have kids, whatever. That changes things, and so your plan needs to be flexible, and it needs to change and adapt as your life changes.
So what are a few things that you think people, as their life is changing, like what's some advice that you would give them of things to do when it comes to their financial picture? What are 3 things that you really focus on making sure that people are protected for?
Well, one thing is, and you hear this a lot, so I don't want to beat a drum too long, but manage your debt responsibly. You don't have to be debt-free right away. And I know some people make the mistake of trying to get debt-free so quickly that they're not saving any money, investing any money. Balance that. Work on getting your debt down, but at the same time, be saving and investing money for your goals.
Yeah.
Because you can't make up that lost time. If you wait 10 years to get that house paid off or whatever the debt is that you're trying to pay off, and you haven't saved any money, you're 10 years behind the curve on getting your investments going to accomplish your other goals. So balance that, and a good financial advisor will help you do that. Make sure it fits your budget. If you're a dual income family or a single income family, make sure it fits that, but you're accomplishing multiple purposes at the same time. You can tackle more than one goal at a time.
Yeah, and I think that creeps up on people too. Is the retirement age creeps up on you pretty fast, and if you're not saving anything throughout that time period, then you get there and you're like, well, what the heck am I going to do?
Yeah, it's hard to make up for that lost time. And, if you have young children, college creeps up on you even faster. And you can get loans for college, and a lot of people do. Most people do probably. But you can't get loans for retirement. I haven't seen any banks offer loans for retirement. So that's one thing you kind of got to do on your own. Social Security will help. That'll be a piece of it. And yes, I believe it will be there. It may not be in the same form that we see it today, but it will be there. But you need to be saving on your own. And even if your company has a 401k or a 403b or some type of pension plan, I recommend people also contribute to their own personal retirement account in addition to whatever your company's doing.
So what's the big driver for that? Why do you want people to, why would you, because that's a hiccup I've seen talking to different people is they're like, oh yeah, well I have this thing at work. What's the big kicker behind that? Why is work not the only place that they should use?
Well, they want to look and see how much income is that going to generate at the age that they want to retire. So let's say you're 30, you're 35 years old, you want to retire when you're 60, okay? That 401k may not generate enough money for you to retire and have the same income you do today, or the same income you did the day before you retired. So look and see if you can keep contributing at the rate you're contributing, and possibly your company is matching a portion of that. What's the total amount that will grow to by the time you're 60? And then if you took that nest egg, that lump sum amount of money, would that generate enough income for you to retire on with your Social Security? Probably not. And that's why I recommend have your own retirement account, an IRA, or there's other, Roth plans, things like that we can do to supplement that to make sure you do have enough money. Because, inflation is a hot topic right now. And we know that, if you're a person making $75,000 today, if you're still making $75,000 30 years from now, it's going to seem like about $20,000. So we got to do things to grow this pot of money that you're going to eventually use for retirement.
Correct. I think that's huge. And so to go a little bit further on that, somebody that doesn't have any knowledge of the industry or how the things work, and they just go in and they talk to their whether it's their union rep or whoever's setting those plans up for them, what does that process look like? Are you reviewing their work plans as well, or are you just kind of, how does that work?
Yes, we actually review everything. We look at with all the accounts that they have with other brokers, other financial advisors, plus what they have at work. Because usually when people sign up for a retirement plan at work, they don't get much advice.
Correct.
Very little. So they're investing in things that they may not, unless they have an education in financial services, they probably don't even realize what they're investing in very much detail. So I would recommend take that to your financial advisor and let them look at it. At my firm, what we do is we promise you that we will review your finances, review what you're doing at least twice a year, more often than that if you want to. But I want to make sure that we're looking at it every 6 months, because a lot can happen in 6 months and a lot can happen in a year.
Yeah, and you don't want to take those things and especially if you built a plan, you don't want to put a lot of effort into building a plan and then just not monitoring it, because then it's gonna turn into you have no idea what's going on with it. And
That's right.
Lose a ton.
And the laws change, and and your contribution limits, maximums change. The income thresholds for can you invest in an IRA or a Roth IRA. That changes. The government, the IRS changes that from year to year. So it's really good to meet with someone that can get you up to date on that and make sure you're taking full advantage.
Yeah. So is people moving to the Kansas City area. So what would be your advice? They do have those 401ks with their job now, but they're leaving that job to come to a new opportunity in the Kansas City area. What do they do with that account? Do they let that company hold it, or what should they be doing, and who should they be talking to about that?
That's a really good question, Dylan. If they changed companies to move to Kansas City, so they're starting a new job here in Kansas City, they have this 401k or 403b or pension plan from their previous employer. You need to bring that into someone like me to take a look at that to see, is it advantageous for you to leave it there? Or is it advantageous for you to roll it into the new plan at your new employer? Or another option may be to roll it, to a company like Thrivent, where I work, and let us manage that separately and do it in harmony with your new plan, your new 401k at the new position. There's a lot of factors to look at. What are the investment options? How much advice had you gotten in the past on this plan? And what are the expenses? I mean, every plan has expenses. There's internal expenses built into it, and many times you can roll it and it can be less expensive, but sometimes not. So there's never an always do this or always do that. You have to look at each case individually to see, but a good financial advisor can do that for you.
And I think that's one huge thing that I've always gained from you is just to give our viewers a little bit of a background, is Todd was actually my sales leader with a company in the past, and I've always looked at him as a mentor and learned a lot of how my sales processes work from Todd. The biggest thing that I've always focused on is being in needs-based selling and figuring out what actually fits the client. And I do that a lot with housing, and listings and everything. I try to figure out when I walk into a situation, what are their biggest worries? Are they worried about how they're going to move their stuff out? Are they worried about the closing date? Are they worried about, what is their biggest worry? And then we're going to take that worry and get it out of the way. Let's attack that worry first, and then we'll get into everything else and the meat and potatoes of everything. Is it the money side of it? How much money you have to have? Because we're going to go through sheets and stuff like that. And I know you do that with a lot of your clients. And what you said there is, if it's not a smart move for your success, I'm not going to do it. And it's the same way with you guys is if it's not a smart move for them to switch that investment to you, then you're going to do what's best for the client. And I think that's huge when you're looking for financial services, you're looking for real estate, you're looking for anybody in the industry, and you need somebody that you can trust and that's going to look out for your best interest and really try to take care of the things that you want, because everybody's situation is different.
Mm-hmm. Well, my business, I'm sure like yours, Dylan's, is built on repeat business and referrals. That's how I grow my business, and the only way to have repeat business and referrals is to have happy clients.
Correct. You got to take care of people.
Right. Take care of people and make sure they understand that their needs come first, and that their concerns. We have to address their concerns too. So when we meet with people in the very first appointment, I ask them, what are your top 3 goals and what are your top 3 concerns? Because I want to, like you said, I want to help mitigate those concerns. There are risks out there in everything you do, whether it's jumping in your car and driving down 435, or it's investing in a new mutual fund or ETF. There are risks, and you need to understand those risks, and we want to mitigate those risks as much as we can for you.
Yeah. So talk to me a little bit about having these conversations, because some of these conversations, when you're in the retirement planning, it's a little bit fun, but people tend to avoid it. So what things do you do to really help make that process easy for them and to help get them into that conversation? Because I know people try to avoid it. It's one of those things that I'm not there yet. I'm going to push that to the back burner. We'll do that when we're ready for it.
Well, what I do, when you're 25 or 30 years old, you think, man, retirement is so far off. I just don't even want to think about it. But I try to help young adults get started, even if it's at a small amount. Besides what they're doing at their employer, you start with a small amount. It doesn't have to be a huge amount in the beginning. And then every time you get a promotion, every time you get a raise, every time your financial position is a little bit better, increase that amount that you're investing. Because it's not a bill, it's savings. It's savings and investment for your future. Most people don't go into the workforce with the idea that they're going to work till they're 75 or 80.
Correct.
And most people are wanting to retire younger if that's possible. So if you're wanting to do that, you need to start investing younger and investing in a smart way, in a tax efficient way, so that you can retire when you're 55 or 60 or whatever age you set up.
And I think that's a big thing is everybody has an idea, but very few people actually put it into a plan and execute it. And when you're trying to put something as huge as, hey, I want to retire when I'm 55 so that I can actually have time to enjoy my life, because that's one thing that I think creeps up on everybody is age. And they're like, oh, I'm not going to get like that. And then I hear it from my dad. He just turned 50 last year, 51 this year. He's like, I never thought I'd be like this sore all the time. And he's put his body through hell. And that's just part of it. And now he's like, I wish I would have done these few things differently. And an employee that I used to have, she's worked her entire time and continues to work her entire time. And I'm like, hey, I just talked to her a little while back. I'm like, when are you going to take some time off for you? Because, and that's the biggest thing with if people get started early, then they can get in, do their time, and then get out. But if they don't get started early, they end up being somebody that's 70 years old still working at the same place.
And you want to retire when you're young enough to enjoy the other things you want to do in retirement, like traveling, like spending time with family, grandkids, whatever it is that you want to do. You want to be young enough and able enough to enjoy that time. And so that's going to take some planning and some strategy and some preparations. Now, I always ask people what retirement looks like to them, because it's different for everybody. Some people, they may work at one company for 40 years, retired, and they never work another day of their life. The next person may have worked at 3 or 4 or 5 companies, and when they retire, they just retire from full-time work, but they still want to be out there amongst the people and meeting new people. They enjoyed what they did. They just want to do it part-time now.
Correct.
So they're kind of semi-retired. They're drawing maybe a retirement check from their company that they worked for, but now they're working 2 or 3 days a week at another company, or maybe even in a small business that they started. So everybody's retirement looks a little different. Some people want a super active retirement where they're traveling and water skiing, snow skiing, all that kind of stuff. Some people want to just veg out on their little acreage, and hunt and fish and things like that. So I never assume what retirement is going to look like for that person until I ask them what they want it to look like.
That's smart. I think that's extremely smart. So to talk about the traveling and stuff, one big thing I like to give the viewers, if they're thinking about moving to the Kansas City area, and I know you're pretty active and go out and do different things around the Kansas City area, what are 3 places that you really enjoy around the Kansas City area that you think if somebody's moving here, they should check out?
Well, there's so many more than 3. There's lots to do. You got to go to a Chiefs football game. You got to pony up, pay the price, get the tickets, get some good seats, and go to a Chiefs football game, because there's nothing more electric than watching the Chiefs win a game on a Sunday afternoon. So that'd be one thing. We have tons of good sports in Kansas City. So a Royals game, a soccer game. We have awesome college basketball around Kansas City. We have 3 D1 major college basketball teams, and of course we're just coming off of, at the end of March Madness, so I'm still thinking about that. K-State made a heck of a run this year. So enjoy the sports in Kansas City. Enjoy the restaurants in Kansas City. There's tons of good restaurants. I like going down to the Plaza. Just every restaurant in the Plaza is good. Buca de Beppo is a great restaurant. Eddie V's, if you like steak and seafood, that's an awesome place. Seasons 52. Near the Plaza, you got Jack Stack. They have a couple locations.
Jack Stack is awesome.
I love KC barbecue. If you're new to this area, you got to get into the Kansas City barbecue, because it's the best in the world. I've eaten it everywhere. So sample them all, because they are different. Like Gates barbecue is so much different than Jack Stack or Q39. See which one you like the best, but it's awesome.
Yeah. That's awesome. So so your perfect date night in the Kansas City area, what are you and Tina doing? What are you and your wife doing?
Oh, it depends on if I'm choosing or my wife's choosing. So,
Well,
so we know my wife's choosing, right?
yeah, yeah.
Okay, so she's going to want to shop a little bit, and then go to a nice dinner on the plaza, um, Capitol Grill, Eddie V's, Seasons 52, or if we're with a big group of friends, Buca de Beppo. It's so loud in there, and you get a bunch of people together, and everybody's having a good time. So,
Yeah. Well, and you've been around the Kansas City area basically your whole life, correct? Yeah. So what are some things that you think somebody should be aware of if they are moving to the Kansas City area? Maybe some things that they don't like, they may not like.
well, there's not many things not to like, except maybe winter.
And the winter's awful.
Winter can be a little brutal sometimes. I mean, it's not like we live in the north, but winter's in the Midwest, especially when you're enjoying summer, enjoying the beautiful falls, and then all of a sudden it's December, January, and the snow's flying and all of that. So I do kind of enjoy getting away a little bit in the winter and maybe a trip to Florida or Texas or somewhere. But the only other thing I can think of is right now, after winter is over, there are some serious potholes out there. I mean,
Oh, yeah.
like it take the suspension out from underneath your car. So watch out for that if you're new to Kansas City, because that ice, it gets in those cracks and it eats away, and until the highway department gets out there and fills those up, it can be brutal. I hit one last week. I thought I was going to wreck.
And I think that goes right into the biggest concern that I have is you never know which way you're going to be able to take to work because they're always filling those potholes.
Yeah.
And there's always construction. It's good now that maps keep you updated on it, but there is, and it seems like these same roads have construction all the time. So I think that's just one thing that people need to be aware of if they're moving to Kansas City. Be ready for the construction and maybe some delays. It's going to take you 15, 20 minutes to get somewhere.
Yeah, and I worked for a very short time in college for the highway department on the Missouri side, and give those guys a break, give them some room, okay? They're just doing their job, and they got to do it, so we do have good, safe highways and streets and stuff.
Yeah.
I know it's an inconvenience for everybody, but if they don't do it, it just gets worse. So we got to have some.
Well, and
some
I have some friends and family that have worked on the highway department, and there's some people out there that are pretty rude to them. Will fly by them 100 miles an hour and not be paying attention and almost hit them. I mean, I was talking to one that was a foreman on one of the crews, and she actually ended up following a guy because he almost hit 3 of her workers.
I was working for the highway department one summer in between semesters at college, and I went to Mizzou. And so anyhow, I was working on this crew, and we had the cones set up, and I was standing a little too close to the cones. And this is I-35, and people are flying by at whatever speed that they don't slow down, And the guy I was working with grabbed me by the collar of my shirt and yanked me out of the way before a semi came by that I would have been like a bug on the front of his grill.
Oh my gosh!
So he saved my life. He really did.
That stuff's scary.
Yes.
That's a scary job to be working. If you're not used to it and you're not used to where you need to be standing, I think that's with anything. I mean, we had a guy coming over and cut down a tree the other day, and I was talking to him about it afterwards, like if people come out and try to help him, and he's like, I hate that. He's like, because then they don't know where to stand and different stuff like that. And he's like, it's just easier if my crew runs the whole thing. And they, like homeowners think they're helpful, but then they get in the way and they don't exactly know where they are at all times. And when you're working a job like that, you got to know where your people are. And just like the foreman grabbing you, he knew where you were, grabbed you, and it's just instinct.
Thank goodness. Yeah.
At that point.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's huge. So let's jump back over into the financial planning and stuff. What are some things that if somebody's really wanting to get their financial stuff in check, what are some things not to do?
Well, I think I mentioned this before, but don't use rules of thumb. Don't do what your brother's doing, what your uncle's doing, what your aunt's doing. Just because that worked for them doesn't mean it's going to work for you. Okay. So throw all that out the door. Be careful about reading just newspaper articles or online articles about investing. You really need to make sure that what you do is tailored to you, okay? Don't get in too big of a hurry to pay off your debt if you're not able to save money at the same time. I know people want to become debt-free, and that is an important goal, and that should happen. But if you get in too big of a hurry to get your debt paid off, your cash flow can be interrupted, and then you may have an emergency expense that comes up. You don't have any cash to do it.
Correct.
End up taking out that mortgage, a new mortgage on your house just to pay for that huge medical bill that you didn't have any cash saved up for. So just be careful about getting ahead of things. Make sure that you know what your goals are. If you have a spouse or a partner, make sure that you talk to each other so that you're on the same page. Because if you're not on the same page, you kind of have this tug of war between your goals.
Yeah.
So try to get on the same page, get it written down, and then most importantly, meet with a financial advisor that will ask you about your goals and help you set up a solid plan to get to the goals instead of just leaving it to chance. Because if you leave it to chance, there's a good chance it won't happen.
Correct. It's more of a 90-10 plan than you're 90% this isn't going to happen.
It's more of a wish than a goal. Yeah.
Yeah. So you said something a little interesting there, that if a husband and wife aren't on the same page on that, how many times do you do this risk assessment and husbands and wives are polar opposites?
Occasionally they're polar opposites. They're always different. I very seldom have a husband and wife that are exactly the same in the risk tolerance.
So how do you connect their thoughts?
Well, usually we end up with something that's a little bit in between. Now, what I've found in couples is that there's always one person in the couple. Sometimes it's the wife, sometimes it's the husband, but one of them is usually more of the financial mind in the family. Usually in a good couple, they complement each other. A weakness in one is a strength in the other, and vice versa. So usually there is one of the two that's more financially minded, and we'll talk about that with the couple. Now, I want them both to be comfortable. Sometimes one of the couple will say, well, she is the one that always makes those decisions, so I'm a little uncomfortable with this, but whatever she decides, I'm okay with. But if that's not the case, then we'll try to find a happy ground in between, where they're at. Yeah,
we just work through it and see what ultimately comes down to it. I mean, I work with clients too, to where there's one that makes more of the decisions than the other, and they say, hey, ultimately, I'm making this decision, or they're making this decision, and they point that in the other direction.
There's one other thing we do too, is we ask the person who may be a little more conservative, a little more concerned, I ask them what their main concerns are, and we try to help mitigate that risk. I mean, there are definitely some things we can do to mitigate risk in the market, risk in not achieving that goal, and we'll put some things in place so if the what ifs happen, somebody loses their job, somebody gets disabled and they're not able to work anymore and contribute to these goals, that we have some things in place that will help support that.
So let's talk a little bit about what happens when, there's the big thing is what happens when they have this big plan and then one of them passes away. Like, what are you building? I know you are, just because from working with you in the past, but talk a little bit about how you build in those buffers as well, because that's one thing that I think some people out there struggle to get to the conversation of is what's the death rate in Missouri, Kentucky, Oklahoma, whether you're in Texas or anywhere. It's 100% everybody's going to die. Yeah. And you have to have a plan for if that does happen, because nobody ever knows when that's going to creep up either. So talk a little bit about what you do for clients on that aspect.
Sure. I always ask people, I say, where are you at with your life insurance plan right now? Most people have some type of life insurance. There's some people don't, especially younger folks. But I find out, what do they have at work? Do they have life insurance at work? Do they have a plan that maybe their parents started on them when they were a child and they've carried forward? We find out what that is, and then we have a formula that we use at my group where we determine exactly how much do you need. Most people don't know.
Correct.
But it's really not a complicated formula. It's really you take your loans or your debt, you add all that up, and I ask the client, would you want that debt erased? Would you want it paid off if one of the two of you passed away? If the answer is yes, we include that in the formula. The next thing is income replacement. How much of your income would need to be replaced for your partner, your spouse, if something happened to you so that they could continue paying the bills that are going to come in every month no matter what? And that may be 100% of their income, it may be 50% of their income, whatever it is. and then we'll factor that in, and usually we'll replace 8 to 10 years of that income. The next portion of the formula is final expenses. Final expenses are pretty well set. Cost of burial, funerals, cemeteries, things like that, headstones, cremation, whatever it is. We add that up, we put that into the formula. And the last thing is, if there are children in the family, do you want to have an education fund for them? And how much would you want to leave in that fund so that they could go to college or trade school or whatever's, beyond high school for them? We add all that up. That gives us kind of one big number. And then we subtract out of there any savings, other than retirement savings, any savings that they would want to use to meet that goal if something happened
Correct.
and this person passed away. Also, we would subtract any existing life insurance. If there's anything left over, that's an unmet need that they need to have a certain amount of death benefit for, additional death benefit. And then we go into the different types of ways that they can meet that death benefit with different types of life insurance.
And that's the thing is there's a ton of different avenues once you figure out what that need is. And that I know that was one thing when I was in the financial services industry is, I have it at work, or I have this or whatnot. The big thing is reviewing that and making sure that you have enough. Because if something happens, that is the biggest thing that causes friction in families and in like if a husband passes away and the wife's still there with the kids, it causes friction between the other family because there's just so many things that come into play with that. I had one guy that I sat down with, and the husband said, I'm not giving her any money so that she can go get with the next guy. And my response to that is the same as I'd heard it multiple times, is give her enough that she don't have to. Because at that point in time, if you've got parents, whether it's one or the other, they're used to having that comfortability of somebody being there to handle the things that they don't necessarily handle, whether that's the wife on that side taking care of the kids and stuff like that. They're going to have to find some way to replace that. And if they don't have the money to pay for that service, they're going to have to look outward and do that as well.
Yeah, and I think, you're in the real estate business, and you think, what's the biggest purchase, the biggest asset somebody owns, pays for, and that's their house usually.
Yeah.
So you invest $200,000, $300,000, $400,000 in a house. I asked both the husband and the wife, I said, would you want your spouse to be able to remain in this house if something happened to you? Because they've got a pretty big payment that they're making every month.
Correct.
So the only way we can guarantee that is if that house is paid off and it's free and clear, then we know that the surviving spouse and the children could stay in the home as long as they want to. So, that's just one piece of the puzzle, but that's an obvious example of why the right amount of life insurance is important.
Yeah, and it's going to be different depending on which client you're talking to, whether it's the husband or the wife, depending on what their whole situation is and what they're bringing to the table and those type of things. So you've got to have somebody that's good and that you can trust that's going to be able to break that down for you, because I think that is huge. And it doesn't. Nobody's ever going to be able to take away from the loss of whether it's a child, as a wife, a husband, or mom, dad, any of that stuff. But giving people time to grieve, I think, is the biggest thing. Is you see so many things. When we were back with the old company, there was a lot of statistics that they brought up just on the amount of children's life policies that we paid out on. And then they always showed another statistic that, what is it? I think it's like 3 out of 4 families that lose a child end up in divorce. And I believe a lot of that is because they don't have the time to grieve. Mm-hmm. So even when it's coming down to children's, and were you talking about earlier, if a family or a parent had bought a policy on you when you were younger, those policies are inexpensive, and hope like hell you never have to use it. But if you do, that may be something that helps save your marriage as well.
That's a good point. And, mental health is a big topic right now.
Correct.
And you talk about a couple that's lost a child. I mean, that is a very devastating,
rough,
tragic event in someone's life. And we probably both know people that's happened to. And having access to good mental health care is important. And it's not cheap. And sometimes your health insurance covers that, and then a lot of times it doesn't. So you can use the proceeds from life insurance to help pay for those services, those mental health care services that you need at that point in time. Because, like you said, a lot of couples don't make it through that, and but more would if they could seek good mental health services, counseling, and take care of themselves, and maybe have some time off from work before they have to go back and get back into the grind and the normal duties of everyday life.
And it's a tough conversation to have. Like, it is a tough conversation to have with these parents and with everybody. And that's why now I'm on the real estate side, and buying and selling homes are a little bit easier conversations, but you still have to talk about hard stuff. And I envy that about anybody that's selling life insurance and talks about that thing, because even though it's a tough conversation, it needs to happen. I mean, that's one of my biggest fears. We just had our 4th child 2 weeks ago, and this is the worst stage in the world. I cannot stand that 0 to 6 month stage, because I can't ever tell whether they're actually breathing or their chest isn't moving. So you're like sitting there staring at them like, what is going on? And then they make a noise and you're like, okay, it's good. And then like you don't hear anything for the next 5 minutes and you're like, are you still good? And that's every parent's biggest fear.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
We
that's
had the
at least my
baby
biggest
monitors whenever my kids were little. Now my kids are in their 20s, but when they were little, we had the baby monitors, right by their crib, and I had them turned up so loud if I couldn't hear them breathing, I would jump out of bed and run into the room and wake them up.
Yeah,
which
and then
is the
you
worst thing,
touch their chest and their arms go out like this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
It's crazy how much the little humans can affect everything about you, because you're just sitting there looking at them like, yeah, I don't know what I'd do in that situation. And that's why I envy that. You have to have that conversation with everybody.
the other thing about the amount of life insurance and kind of the equation, the formula I was going through, is that most people think about the debt. They kind of like the debt paid off, but they don't think about replacing the income for that parent that passed away.
Correct.
Think about this. If you took your whole budget and everything that you and your wife spend money on every month, and you took out the loans, I don't know what loans you have, but say you had a house loan and maybe had a car payment or two, take those out, there's still a lot of bills. Your health insurance, your taxes, your food, your groceries, your gas, clothes for the kids. I mean, there's just a lot of bills, and it takes a lot of money, even if you're completely debt-free. So I ask people, I say, if you were debt-free, how much income would it take just to pay all the other stuff? So if dad passed away or mom passed away unexpectedly, how much of their income should we replace for at least 10 years? Is it half of it? Is it 2/3 of it? Maybe it's all of it. But usually we need some amount of income replacement for that one parent, because I don't know very many families that are getting by on just the husband's or the wife's income. For most people, it's both together.
Correct.
To meet all the bills. And even debt-free, if there were no loans or mortgages or anything like that, it would still take a pretty big chunk of both of their paychecks to make it happen.
Yeah, and I think one thing, back when I did it a lot, one thing I always brought up was, if I offered you a job and I just paid off your house right now, you come work for me, you never come out of my basement ever again, but your house is paid off. Are you guys signing up for that? Is that what your family want? Like, is your wife going to be okay with that? You're never coming home again. You're working for me for the rest of the time, but I'm going to pay all your debt off. Mm-hmm. Does that look good for your wife or your husband, or how does that look for them? And nobody's taking that deal.
Right.
So that's why we have to protect more of that as well as the income, because nobody's taking that deal. And in that situation, it's already the worst situation possible, because, and that's all that life insurance and death benefit is it's trying to put a damper on the damages that are going to come from that worst situation.
Yeah.
So I think that's huge. So Todd, get a little bit into, or actually, everything that we've went through has been great. And I think a lot of people, if you're looking at moving to the Kansas City area and you really want to figure out what your game plan is and figure out some more financial advice so that as you make this transition, you have a ton of financial success, reach out to Todd and sit down and talk with them about what your plans are. But before we get out of here, give me your elevator pitch. Why should everybody come to you for their financial planning and life insurance and other needs?
I would say that, like I said before, everybody has goals that they want to accomplish, but I can help you attach your finances to those goals to where they support and grow, and as you invest over time, you'll actually reach your goal, and it's not just a hope and a wish. It's a goal that's actually going to happen. I have 30 years of experience and background in working with all different types of people, wealthy people, people that aren't even close to being wealthy, and all of us in between. So I can work with people with different income levels, different amounts of experience, different amounts of assets, and you don't have to be wealthy to need a financial advisor.
Correct.
Matter of fact, you'll never become wealthy probably if you don't have a financial advisor, unless you win the Powerball or something. And most people don't, by the way.
And even if they do, if you don't have somebody to teach you how to manage that,
Probably lose it.
you're probably going to lose it.
Right. If you don't hire me to help you, hire somebody that has some designations behind their name, CHFC or CFP, that's Chartered Financial Consultant or Certified Financial Planner. These people have gone over and above on getting extra education to help you. People with experience that have been in the business for a while and have seen the ups and downs of the market, because one thing I can guarantee you is if you're in the market, it's going to go up some days and it's going to go down some days. We don't always know when that happens. Over the long term, it always goes up, but you need a good financial advisor to kind of guide you through that and help you to accomplish the goals that you want to accomplish.
And I think that's huge, and that's one of the biggest reasons I appreciate having you as a mentor and having you as a person to bounce ideas off of and help with anything that I have going on in my life is the experience that you do have. And I've watched it personally when you were going through your CHFC classes, and we were still together quite a bit during those days, and I watched how much dedication you put into that, and that's one of the biggest reasons I would push everybody your way if they're looking for a financial advisor, is because I know you spend a lot of time perfecting your craft. I really appreciate you coming out today and doing this interview with me. And again, if you're looking at moving to Kansas City and you want help, whether it's in the financial industry or it's anything from loans or figuring out what's going on, you want an inspector, different stuff like that, reach out to me. Dylan Fry, real estate guy. I've got a real estate license in Missouri. I'm here to help you buy or sell any properties in the Kansas City area. And my entire goal is to educate you on the people that you need around you to help make that process successful. So if you need a guy, reach out to me. If this is your first time to the channel and you really like these interviews, make sure you hit that like button and then also subscribe to the channel and then hit that bell so you'll get future notifications of different people we bring in here that's going to help you have a successful transaction. Thank you, guys.